Welcome to Season 2 of Masterclass with Utpal Sheth. Well, in Season 1, we've established and we've spoken about the concept of terminal value investing, guerrilla companies, and what are the factors or the pillars which in a sense makes companies unique, megatrends, leadership, and intangibles. But in Season 2 of Mega Masterclass, we would be focusing or we would be putting limelight on creative destruction. So what is creative destruction? And in the whole framework of terminal value investing, where does this fit in? That would be the onus and focus of Season 2 of this Masterclass. So Mr. Sheth, first, thank you very much. The first 4 episodes of Season 1, I think, was a great learning for me personally and for our viewers and also for our listeners. So first, thank you very much for Season 1 and thank you for joining us for Season 2.
Thank you, Nikunj. You are very kind. That was the whole idea of sharing our learnings over the years. I enjoyed the process as much. So thank you for walking this journey with me.
Creative destruction, that's a very powerful word. But for a value investor, and where does this fit in the overall framework of terminal value investing?
True. So Nikunj, we are all living in the world of change. As Bhagavad Gita says, change is the only constant. That change is now happening at an ever accelerating pace. And with that change, value is shifting. As an investor, therefore, one has to adapt to that change and pursue that shift in value. If one doesn't, then one is stuck on the wrong side of value migration. You know, Shakespeare had this fantastic quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men which, when taken at the flood, leads on to fortune." So that is the change and the power of the value shift that we are talking about. Creative destruction specifically was a term coined by this economist called Joseph Schumpeter. And through every economic cycle, there is a process of creation and destruction, both. Even the traditional Hindu trinity talks about Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, which is the creator, the nurturer and the destroyer. So there, that same concept of creation and destruction simultaneously is brought together. Now, why is this process of creative destruction through each economic cycle triggered? It is triggered either because of innovation, or because of imbalance in demand supply, or because of change in business models, or change in financial models, or it could be change in demographics, and so on. There are many such factors. There was a Russian economist called Nikolai Kondratiev who came up with this concept of Kondratiev cycles. Okay? And if you see the data, these Kondratiev cycles have coincided with very large innovations. And typically, Nikolai Kondratiev talked of an economic cycle of roughly 78 years duration. But subsequent economists, for example, there is an economist called Dan Smihula, who talks about the shortening of these cycles. So from, let's say, the agricultural revolution, which took a little over 180 years, to the Industrial Revolution, which took less than that, to the Computer Revolution, or the Information Age Revolution, which took even lesser than that, to the Digital Revolution, which is taking even less than that. So what we are seeing is that the value shift occurring in each cycle is getting larger and larger, and at the same time, the time of that value shift, that process of creative destruction in an economic cycle is getting shorter and shorter. So like the universe is ever expanding, this value shifts is not just ever expanding but also ever accelerating. So I think it is imperative for each investor, especially terminal value investors, to be conscious of creative destruction and participate in that creation process while simultaneously avoiding the destructive part of the cycle.
So what are the characters, what are the features which in a sense you would say are important for creative destruction?
See, creative destruction typically will be visible in throughout economics because of, as I said, demographics, technological disruption. It could be displacements of business models or business components. Like maybe we are seeing a shift from the unorganized sector to the organized sector post demonetization and GST, right? So all of these different types of disruption, so we call it the 4D framework: demographics, disruption, displacement, and discontinuity. These 4 factors will keep triggering creative destruction. Creative destruction is not limited to any one sector at any point of time. Typically, you will see it across sectors. For example, the invention of electricity or the light bulb or the steam engine or gunpowder would have massive implications across multiple sectors. And while we've seen that in the past, just imagine that the impact of maybe 3D printing or artificial intelligence or robots will be far more wider and far deeper than what we've seen, anything that we've seen before.
Okay. So what are the examples of creative destruction? You spoke about, let's say, gunpowder, steam engine. I can talk about internet. I can talk about, in modern terminology, even UPI, or for that matter, birth of Geo. So there are multiple examples which we can relate with it today also. So what are the examples according to you of creative destruction, business shift?
So creative destruction leads to change in customer preferences, customer wants, will lead to change of delivery models, change of cost structures, or even change of business models. You mentioned UPI. What is the change that UPI has brought about? I remember there used to be a time when wafers were priced at 5 rupees simply because that was the smallest coin that was feasible, and you could not take the pricing from 5 to 6 because of the constraints of the coinage. Those constraints are way behind. Today, the smallest of businesses are enabled with payment mechanisms which are universal. I think these changes are so wide-ranging that they are leading to newer business models. They are leading to newer delivery models. You tell me how much of food delivery that we are seeing today, would it have grown so rapidly if the payment systems and delivery technologies would not have kept pace? If customer acquisition costs would have been very different from what they are today, and so on.
Okay. So basically it is really understanding where technology is moving or where customer is moving, or technology is making customer move. What is the core here then?
See, it's not always technology. I would like to emphasize that, Nikunj, because we are seeing it in non-technology areas also. I'm sure you're seeing youngsters today who will be dead against their family buying an ICE vehicle. They'll want their family to buy an electric vehicle. Now, while it is new technology, the preference for the new technology is being driven by a different consciousness. Therefore, I think it is wrong to restrict these changes only to technology. Technologies can be trigger points also, but non-technology trigger points are also there.
And what are the examples of non-technology trigger points here? We famously discussed HDFC Bank last time. We famously discussed a jewelry company last time. Do these companies fit in the whole concept of creative destruction?
I think creative destruction is all pervasive. As I said, I would prefer giving you global examples. So let's talk of Blockbuster versus Netflix. Right? Blockbuster were stores in which you could rent DVDs and CDs. Netflix started mail order delivery of DVDs and CDs. That was the first round of disruption. But the second round of disruption was even greater when Netflix started streaming. And that led to phenomenal value creation for Netflix and tremendous value destruction for
Netflix and Blockbuster.
Blockbuster, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So let's now understand the whole core of when you are investing, how do you really understand creative destruction could lead to shift in value? For example, as an investor, like they always say that focus on where the puck will move, not where the puck has moved. How does one go about relating in real life?
True. So given that we've established that the value shifts are expanding and at the same time accelerating. So you have greater change in value per unit of time. Okay. The moment you accept that, then it becomes imperative for you to be where the puck is going to be. Now, these value shifts, to put it in the context of another famous book by Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, he talks of the different phases of such innovation. He called it the S-curve, where there are early adopters and then late adopters and all of that, where you have a phenomenal curve, and after that you have a maturity phase where you flatten out and then you start declining. There, if you are not able to shift your company and your business onto the next S-curve, then you move into the zone of this value destruction. It is imperative for you to shift into the next S-curve to continue to be in the zone of value creation. So the life cycle of innovation, not just technology, it could be innovation of business models, it could be innovation of delivery models, but the life cycle of innovation in any and every form will keep creating value. And these are long periods in absolute terms, but these long periods are shorter than they were in the past.
And that is happening because of speed, technology, connectivity, and globalization.
Yes, it is also happening because of scale. For example, in the 1980s, there were more than 60, 70, 80 cement companies listed on the stock exchange. And the largest cement player was single-digit market share. Over these 35, 40 years, we've seen a tremendous consolidation in the cement sector, where the largest 4 players now have such a dominant portion of the market. So you will see these changes happen. In cement sector, it has taken, let's say, 40 years, but you will see those changes happening in other sectors in maybe 10 years.
In association with SBI, Solid Bank की solid backing.
Introducing the new Kushak. Now starts at ₹10.89 lakh.
Skoda. शीर्षासन कहते हैं इसे।
आप बस स्ट्रेस कम कर रहे हैं, घर नहीं बिक रहा ना।
बाहर से नहीं मिल रहा।
घर बेचना है तो मैजिक ब्रिक्स पे आइए। यहाँ पे हजारों सेलर्स रोज मिलते हैं लाखों बायर्स से,
ताकि प्रॉपर्टी जल्दी बिके और बेटर प्राइस मिले।
अब आप सीधे हो जाइए।
Now, before we get into specifics of impact of productivity and impact of corporate earnings, because we always know that markets ultimately follow earnings, is there an example which comes to your mind where a company, in a sense, has seen cycles, has gone through ups and downs, twists and turns, has created value despite despite competition, despite shift in technology? Which is that one company at a global level comes to your mind immediately, which has managed to really stand tall, irrespective of the changes?
So I think it would be tempting to talk about Microsoft here, how Microsoft has evolved from selling permanent licenses of software to a SaaS model, from being B2C to also catering to enterprises, and from being focused only on software to extending its leadership into data centers and all of that, or rather cloud computing. This shift to the SaaS model has created tremendous value for Microsoft. Same way Adobe. It took Adobe 5 to 6 years to move from the traditional permanent license model to the SaaS model. During those 4 or 5 years, the stock price did not go anywhere. The revenues did not go anywhere. The profits did not go anywhere, but the stock multiplied 5x because the market recognized that the business model of Adobe was changing. Same is for Microsoft. So I think markets are wise enough to recognize that change and reflect that change in the way that it values, and that is why our advocacy of terminal value investing, that helps you to continue to pursue the strengths of a company as it keeps evolving. The value in your mind as an investor is never static.
But if I go to the original framework of terminal value investing, it was centered around mega trends. It is centered around market leadership. When a company is shifting gears and is becoming more and more adaptable, where does it fit in terms of mega trends? Where does it fit in terms of the whole idea of being gorilla? Because when you are evolving, you may be starting small. You're not the market leader there, but you are at a stage of experiment there.
See, the stage of experiments is small in relation to the revenue of the legacy model.
Okay.
But in the context of your market share of the new models, that would still be high. When these companies were moving to SaaS models, they were having a dominant share of the SaaS revenues. In the same way, when we are talking about adoption of electric vehicles, etc., globally, because I think we are still in the initial phases in India, we've seen how the value has migrated from ICE vehicle manufacturers to electric vehicle manufacturers.
Okay. Now, creative destruction also is connected with what could be called as value shift. Value shift, just to establish for our viewers, landline users, they've started using mobile phones. From unbranded generic, you move to a generic. From using perhaps unorganized kirana wala, you've started consuming branded products. These are typical concepts of value shifts. I'm just breaking it for our viewers. So in the whole concept of terminal value investing, where does value shift kick in?
Okay. So, Nikunj, before we get into value shifts, I want to establish a few key variables. The first is that whenever you're talking of creative destruction, in the context of terminal value investing, you will bear in mind the total addressable market, which we call as TAM. You will also bear in mind the serviceable addressable market, which we call as SAM. These two variables define the size of the opportunity.
Okay.
Now, the durability of that opportunity is defined by two other variables. One is competitive advantage period, and the second is what we call as the growth advantage period.
Okay.
Okay. So long as you remain conscious of these four variables, hopefully you will be on the right side of creative destruction, and you will be on the right side of gorilla companies in the context of terminal value investing. Coming to value shifts. Now, these are massive waves, so therefore the value shifts are very large and happening at an accelerated pace. But if we decompose those value shifts, then that you can call it value migration. And there is this phenomenal book called Value Migration by Adrian Slivotsky. But I have added some more components to that value migration process. The first is value dispersion,
Okay.
which then goes to value concentration. Okay? And then that leads to winner takes most or winner takes all. However, all of this is part of the value creation framework. There is also a value destruction framework. So, bear in mind all these components of value shifts, and hopefully we get to talk more about it in the next episode.
What are the great examples at a global level, even at India level, which you would say are classic examples of network effect and platform, and the moat is only expanding with each passing day?
So, conventionally speaking, let's say a telecom leader is owning the network, owns the customer is at the top of the funnel, right? And you have the opportunity to provide multiple services to that customer, to each of those customers. So that is a network. But a platform is one where you have many vendors and many customers coming together. Let's say the equivalent of an e-commerce business or a quick commerce business. Those are platforms. The platforms need not always be dealing in physical goods or even services. They could be platforms of people interaction. Let's say the equivalent of a Facebook is a platform for people interaction, or a WhatsApp is a platform for people interaction, and so also Instagram. I think one has to recognize that the marginal cost in these networks and platforms are much lower compared to the marginal revenue, and therefore they result in the parabolic value creation as they gain scale.
Do you think India has some relatable examples of platforms and networks, or we are still a distance away?
No, I think India has adequate models. I wish there were more, but we have now quite a few models. You are aware of certain food delivery platforms. You are aware of, let's say, the job platforms, which are all listed companies, right? You are aware of telecom networks, which are listed companies, and so on. So I think we have quite a few, not as many as maybe in the US or even China, but I think we are getting there. Every year we are adding.
And the productivity gain and the earning push which comes because of the network effect or because of platform, do you think that is something which terminal value investors should always monitor?
Rather than linking the productivity gain to just networks and platforms, I would like to take a wider stance on productivity. We've all grown up learning that stock prices are slaves to corporate earnings. However, corporate earnings themselves are slaves to productivity improvements. These productivity improvements are not just on the cost side. Many of them are on the cost side, but they are also on the value to customer side, either in terms of better quality or lower prices or better delivery models and so on. So as the productivity in any society keeps rising, the efficiency of that society will keep improving. However, that results in a more than proportionate rise in corporate profitability. And now where corporate profits are taxed at really competitive levels globally, like in India, this translation into corporate profitability is seamless, and which is why we've been seeing fairly buoyant corporate profit growth. And we are also seeing a re-rating of the earnings, because markets are recognizing that our corporate earnings now have the opportunity of growing at a faster pace than before. But even if one were to zoom out and think at an economy level, one can keep debating on the real GDP growth rate. But what is far more significant is the fact that the incremental capital output ratio is improving. So the capital intensity of the economy as a whole is improving. I think this improvement of the incremental capital output ratio in India is of far greater significance than our excitement pertaining to the improvement in the real GDP growth rate. Maybe one prime contributor to the improvement in the real GDP growth rate is the improvement in incremental capital output ratio, which means that we may not need the investment to GDP levels that China needed to deliver 8 to 10% GDP growth rate.
That's a great point, right? I mean, we always say that technology, network effect, value migration, speed, it all is creating to what could be called as concentration of time. Speed and cycles are getting shorter, and perhaps you don't need that kind of an ammunition to, in a sense, sparkle. Everything is getting very short, and productivity gains are largely happening because of technology. Will that be a fair assessment?
Productivity gains are happening because of technology, but I think not just because of technology. As I said, at an economy level, the incremental capital output ratio is also, let's say, the IBC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? IBC has led to improvement in capital productivity.
Yeah.
Right? The IL&FS credit crisis that took place and the consequential impact on credit underwriting and loss recognition and so on, the strengthening of the banking system, etc. All of those factors have led to a fundamental change in capital productivity. When you put all of these things together, then rather than getting limited to technology, one must appreciate the change in productivity and what that is doing to corporate earnings and in turn the multiples of the corporate earnings.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.